Could you join me in just a little prayer, because I need a prayer? Divine Light, creator of all that is, let me be an instrument of your wisdom and your love and your message. May I correctly and accurately provide what I have received and do it in a loving way that has your intent filled with it. I surrender to thy will, and I promise to do my best. And you can correct me if I do wrong. Thank you. Amen. You know, this is a season of hope and promise. And Christmas sometimes seems like you repeat the same message over and over again. We replay the same story, the same songs. And it's always, after you do it a while, you want to give something a little more. And I've been praying about this and thinking about this and praying about it, and just so that I might be able to do something better. And I thought about the birth of the child. And I think every child is a sacred gift. I think they're a promise for us to do better. They're a promise for us to share. Unfortunately, sometimes they also become something where we work our own karma through, or we learn our roughest lessons. But they still are extremely sacred, and they're important. But Jesus was a promise of a teacher, a Messiah. And I've talked a lot to you. I could never get past, I worship God, the big kahuna that is everything, because I think God is an energy that transcends. I think it's an energy that flows through every faith-based community. I think it flows through every person who knows how to live and care and share and wants to build and grow. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what sex you are. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care how beautiful you are. Each of you is a sacred blessing of the divine. Each of you is an expression of the love of the divine. Each of you is equally important. And we don't measure importance by all of the superficial things, because what you are is a divine presence in every community. The divinity flows through you. The I am presence is in each and every one of you. Everyone. We come and we do different missions, but we come for a purpose. Jesus came as a way shower, an Essene who could teach us the way, who could walk the way. He showed us what the promise was of what we could be and should be, how we should look at things, how we should grow, how we unfold ourselves. 40 days in the desert. Have any of us spent a full day all by ourselves, quiet, just sitting and listening to the divine? You know, let alone 40 days. You can meet some pretty interesting parts of yourself when you decide to go into that kind of hibernation. Jesus talked about love. He showed us miracles. He taught us, and maybe we weren't ready to learn, that love is a building block. It's an energy. It is the source of all creation, or at least I believe that. I'm not telling you what to believe. I am saying that's what I believe. You will come into your own belief system as God intended. For somebody else to tell you what to believe is an ultimate of disrespect, because you are each inspired by the divine. If we respect one another, we take the time to get to know one another, we care about one another, we respect one another just the way you are. We don't try and change you. We don't try and make you over. We learn to honor you just the way you are. That is the greatest act of love, is to love somebody just the way they are, as God created them, and respect them. That's unconditional love. I think just reflecting about the stories we've been told about the birth of Jesus, and whether it was propaganda or truth or whatever, there's some elements you ought to take a look at, or at least I find interesting. First of all, we have a socioeconomic diversity going on here. We have the wise men who come with wealth. We have the innkeeper that was kind of in the middle socioeconomic group. And then you have the people of the land who are the shepherds. And you have the animals, because they're a sacred part of our world. We have wealth shown in gifts, but we also have the humblest of gift, that an innkeeper saw a family in need. And although there was not room, he gave what he could. It was simple, but it made the story even richer. We are shown that nature operates at the command of the divine. And it works in perfect balance. But we have the wonders of the earth. We have the star that led the wise men. We have the healing of what comes from nature and the herbs. We have the movement of the earth. And animals, if you've ever seen animals when there's an earthquake, they behave differently. They let you know just before it's happening. And they behave differently. They feel it before we do. They also are way showers for us if we respect them and get to know them. Ask anybody who owns a dog. You know, I think that there are so many things in this story that we don't always talk about, that they're little elements that maybe we have to grow into and see better. That all these diverse groups can come together for something, for the birth of a child. Let's just take that this is the birth of a child. I remember when my daughter was born, and there was, I think everybody cries at a birth of a child. There are always tears when a child is born, because it's the wonder. And it usually comes when that baby starts to cry, because you know they've taken their first breath. I am your first breath. The I am presence. I am your first breath. And with it comes the scream. We start communicating right away. If we just take the time to see the sacredness around us, in each and every person, and what gift, you know, when you meet somebody, it's what gift do they have for me? I talked to you before about finding the gift in all things. I'm a great gift seeker, and it's not because I'm selfish, but I think the divine has these things that come to you and says, here I am. Maybe you better pay attention, this lady. You're out of sorts. You better get your act together. Or look at this. This is what you could become if. We are just inundated with social media and movies and music and all kinds of things. Several years ago, I did an artist in residence program with Denver Public Schools, and we brought artists into the schools to teach different things to kids and help support whatever the teachers were doing. And I had this guy who was just amazing. He was multi-talented, and he played several musical instruments, but he also taught history, and he was a hoot. And he was really good with kids, very popular with the teachers. But he would go in and do these programs, and one of them he would do is he would take the decades and he'd play music for each decade, and how the music of the decade reflected the emotion of the decade and what was going on. And he started in the late 1800s, and he moved through the early 1900s, World War I. Then he moved into the Roaring 20s, and then the Depression of the 30s, and then the war years of the 40s, and then the 50s of promise and sophistication and technology. And he went along with each year with the music and how the music reflected the decades and the emotion that it brought. Now, I know you're wondering why I'm going through all of this stuff, because I want you to look around it now. You know, I grew up with all kinds of war protest stuff in the 60s, but I also grew up with some of the romance music, which is the love music. I remember when my husband was in Vietnam, there was a song, "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry." And it was a big, big song for the guys in his unit. And when I hear that song, I'm right back to getting those letters and running for the mailbox. I had class, and then I had to get back to the dorm, which my dorm was it was out in the prairie someplace. They built it new, and it could be colder than hoot with the wind blowing. But man, if I had a break of 10 minutes between classes, I would run my butt out there to get a letter so that I could find out what was going on. That's how important the mail was. But it takes me back to that time when I hear certain songs. And I don't think I'm different than anybody in this room, that you have songs that take you someplace and make it relevant for you. I've never been a big fan of heavy metal because it feels angry to me. It does, and I don't think I'm the only one. But it feels angry. Although I think the kids are pretty funny when they're going, Yeah. And you can tell, you drive up on them and they're in the car and they're sitting in front of you and they're bobbing and weaving and shaking you going, is this a tremor? Are we having a seizure here? And then you can tell the breaks in the music because they stop. Yeah. But I have songs that I think are whiny songs. I have the somebody done somebody wrong songs. I have I have all these songs that have different meaning. But I love joyful songs. I like soothing songs. I like music. Music makes an enormous difference to people. And I look around us now. This brings us to us now. And there's angry. People talk angry. People say sarcasm became a real good sense of humor. Well, sometimes sarcasm isn't so funny. It can be really hurtful. Sometimes it's funny. I'll admit that. Sometimes it's perfect timing. But a steady habit of it can be really dangerous. I look at us that we have public figures that call, and this is not public, this is not a political statement because I don't want it to be. But we have people who don't talk kindly to each other. They call people names that there was, that just didn't happen in my day. I know what soap is. My mother acquainted me with that. Ivory Snow. When you didn't open your mouth, she could squirt it. I am just saying that I think sometimes we don't speak kindly to people. Efficiency, I was at Taco Bell, I ordered something, but the gal was so busy taking the quick order, it was, and I said, I beg your pardon? Could you slow your roll and speak to me? Or what about the half sentences where we just don't say and you don't understand? The people are in such a hurry, they don't take the time to actually be present. Have you ever ordered something and they read it back to you and you didn't understand it because they were reading so fast? Maybe it's just my ears, but it happens. We have a world where people are not gentle and kind with one another, and that is a problem. And I've been praying a lot about a blueprint for peace. And what I've realized is the angrier our music, the nastier we speak to each other, the more violence we see. I heard violence begets violence growing up, anger begets anger growing up. I heard, bullying begets bullying. I heard all of those things. Be careful what you sow, you may reap it. And I've given that a lot of thought all through my life. If you are making your point at the top of your lungs, nobody's listening. They're going like this. If you want to make a point, you gently say, "Can I have a minute?" How many of you have seen me in meetings go, if I want to say something? Because when I'm ready to speak, I want people to listen. But I don't, sometimes people are busy wherever they're at, and if you want to get their attention, if you're yelling, they just yell louder. Even at the dinner table, there are times I go, and the kids just get quiet and they listen. It works. It works. I think peace begins with how we treat one another. And you don't have to like somebody. You don't have to agree with them. You don't have to argue with them. You can just walk away. You do not have to have a response to everything. You can take time to think. You don't have to be bullied and pressured into something. And sometimes that's the kindest, most respectful thing you can do, is just not argue. Because it never solves anything anyway. I prayed and prayed and prayed. Now this has been sitting in my office for a long time. And I was sitting there thinking about this service, and I looked up and this was sitting across from me. It is the prayer of St. Francis. If we have one single blueprint for peace in life, I think this is it. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. You have to be first to make. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. That prayer's been around forever. But doesn't it tell us everything we need to know to make peace? It is the perfect blueprint for peace. Now, I'm not saying this is all easy, because, man, I have my challenges. But if you have a blueprint of how to do something, at least you have an idea what you're building and what tools you're using, right? This is the materials and the tools that we use to build peace. This is the blueprint for peace. It tells us everything, absolutely everything, and how to go about it. It doesn't talk once about screaming and shouting at each other. It doesn't talk once about calling people names. It doesn't talk about violent, you hit me, I'll hit you back. It doesn't talk about those things. It talks about the healing things. I told Coco, I said, if I could have a direct line to the Vatican, I think I'd call the Pope and I'd say, hey, guy, we got a blueprint here for peace. But we got to get everybody on board. We're all talking prayers, but this is a perfect prayer. That and the Lord's Prayer, they tell us so much. And they tell us about our power and our strength and our capability. They tell us what we could be and how to go about it. So, that is what I had to say today, that I think the prayer of St. Francis is our blueprint for peace. But we better start using it, and we better start fast. We have 6 degrees of separation, people. For every person you touch with any one of those things, and they manifest it in their lives, it spreads. So that's today's message. The message I think Jesus was brought, the message of hope and new beginnings. That is our Christmas message. Let us be an instrument of peace. Thank you.